Madonna, music superstar, cultural icon, and by most accounts, still the queen of pop. She has had many top-tier eras throughout her 40-year career, but which one was her greatest? The youthful spunk and exuberance of Like a Virgin, the controversial genius of Like a Prayer, or the euphoric dance floor tribute that was Confessions. In this video we are going to take an in-depth look at the story of Madonna's Ray of Light and see if it truly was Madonna's greatest era. 1997, Madonna's music career was at a crossroads. After releasing records for well over a decade, most acts who even reach this stage in their career have lost relevance, are struggling to find themselves amongst shifting music trends, and may already slowly be becoming nostalgia acts. Pop history tells us that the odds of making a comeback and once again being vital and impactful are pretty low. In the years leading up to Ray of Light, Madonna's music career had been facing challenges, and her public image had been severely damaged, to the point where many thought Madonna may have irrevocably ruined her career. The release of the Erotica single and its video, which was banned by MTV, the Erotica album and Sex Book in late 1992, precipitated an intense backlash against the star which lasted for years after. The situation was not helped by the erotic thriller Body of Evidence in 1993. Released just a few short months after the Erotica album, it was a critical and commercial flop. Madonna had once again got everyone's attention, but this time people felt she had gone too far. The public had grown tired of Madonna's shock antics, and she was vilified. Collectively, these projects, released in quick succession, did untold damage to her career, which would take years to repair. The change in attitudes towards Madonna was very much reflected in her record sales. Erotica only sold half of what her previous studio album, 1989's Like a Prayer, had sold worldwide. Madonna had become accustomed to her albums and lead singles going to #1 in America and around the world. But Erotica stalled at #2 in the UK and US, and the song reached #3 in the same countries. Bad Girl, the third single lifted from Erotica, only reached #36 in the US, becoming Madonna's first single not to reach the top 20. In my humble opinion, a brilliant song, it was probably the victim of the barrage of negative publicity she was facing at the time. The infamous David Letterman interview in early 1994 made matters even worse, with Madonna swearing throughout and getting heckled when she refused to leave the stage at the end of the show. 1994's much tamer Bedtime Stories was a success, but like Erotica, it failed to reach the commercial heights of her earlier albums. Her retrospective collection of ballads, Something to Remember, in 1995 and Evita the following year went some way to repair the damage. For probably the first time in her career, Madonna had been eclipsed commercially by other female artists like Mariah Carey, Celine Dion and Toni Braxton. In October 1996, Madonna gave birth to her first child. She said at the time, "I do think that the birth of my daughter was sort of a rebirth for me. It made me look at my life in a completely new way, and that made me appreciate life in a way I don't think I ever had before." Around this time, she also became a student of Kabbalah, an ancient form of Jewish mysticism. Music-wise, Madonna was listening to a lot of British and French electronica and techno. She wanted Liam Howlett, whose band The Prodigy were signed to Madonna's record label Maverick, to produce her new album, but he declined the offer. She also considered working with Robert Miles and Nelly Hooper on the album, but more about that later. Madonna knew she needed a dramatic reinvention and a new sound to reflect not only the changes that had taken place in her personal life, but also those in the music scene. It had been 3 years since Bedtime Stories, and the music scene had moved on, and the image of the crazed sex provocateur from her Erotica era still lingered. Madonna knew that electronica and techno had not yet reached the masses. An album of inoffensive adult contemporary ballads may have done okay, but would not return her to the top of her game or create much impact. It also wouldn't help her to stay current. She also knew that she wanted to expand her sound but retain her identity for this, her 7th studio album. Madonna had shown an uncanny knack for taking trends and making them her own throughout her career. With her 7th album, she was about to undergo her most ambitious makeover yet, but how she was going to execute her vision was yet to unfold. Madonna didn't have a clear direction for the record in early 1997, so she started with songwriting sessions before production got underway. She started by writing with Babyface, who she had written Take a Bow with, but this material was quickly discarded. According to Babyface, the songs had a Take a Bow-ish kind of vibe, and Madonna didn't want or need to repeat herself. After that, Madonna wrote with Rick Knowles, a hugely successful songwriter who at that point was most famous for writing songs for Celine Dion and Belinda Carlisle. Since then, he's penned hits for Lana Del Rey, FKA Twigs, Dido, Sia, Dua Lipa, and NSYNC, among many others. In an interview, Rick Knowles explained how the collaboration came about. "I always wanted to work with Madonna. I loved her voice and her songwriting. In 1997, I was in New York for the Grammys. I was up for Album of the Year as one of the producers for Celine Dion's Falling Into You. I was in Barney's, the department store, and I saw Madonna there. I introduced myself and I told her that she didn't get the credit she deserved as a songwriter. She was very cool and gracious. I ended up getting a meeting with her in LA a few weeks later. We wrote 9 songs together, 3 made the Ray of Light album, The Power of Goodbye, Little Star, and To Have and Not to Hold." As sessions progressed, Madonna decided that Patrick Leonard wasn't going to produce the record in conjunction with Nelly Hooper. Instead, she chose a relative unknown, an electronic producer from London by the name of William Wainwright, aka William Orbit, known for his techno ambient trip hop work. On her decision to hire Orbit as the main producer on the record, Madonna said, "I wanted to incorporate electronica into my music. I love the haunting, trance-like quality of his records. I've always found something melancholy about his music. Since I'm attracted to that sound and since I tend to write a lot of sad songs, we seemed like a good match." William Orbit had been in a number of underground electronica bands and produced for Beth Orton. He had created remixes for Justify My Love and Erotica, but he didn't meet the woman herself until 1997. Madonna was worried Patrick Leonard would have given her new record too much of a Peter Gabriel vibe, and so she wrote Leonard a lengthy letter explaining her decision to give Orbit the top job. Don't worry, I won't attempt a Madonna accent. "Dear Pat, I had always intended to do a portion of the record with Nelly Hooper. Then I started leaning towards Nelly to do the whole album, and I thought he would treat all songs fairly without favoritism. I sent all my demos to Nelly, and while he gave it up to a few, he made some disturbing remarks about how he was going to have to change the music so much he would want a writer's credit, which of course made me sick. Ego, ego, ego. When I was in New York, I had a meeting with William Orbit, and he played me more tracks that blew my mind. To make a long story short, we ended up doing several tracks together that I absolutely adore. I haven't formally asked him to produce my album, but I'm going to, and I wanted you to know first. I really feel strongly about taking a new direction, and William's sound is a complete departure. I hope you will not be insulted or take offence by this decision. You're a brilliant musician, songwriter, and I have the utmost respect for you. On top of all that, I adore you. You did say you were cool with any decision that I made." Sessions began at the end of June 1997 at Lara B. North Recording Studios, Universal City, Los Angeles. Her voice had developed and improved from the intense vocal training she had received on Evita. In Lucy O'Brien's Like an Icon, Rick Knowles spoke about how much Madonna's voice had improved. In doing Evita, she had 6 months of singing those proper theatre songs. She had to do a lot of training and building her voice. Marius de Vries, who also worked on the record, commented that, "I noticed how much her voice had developed and improved, and how much her confidence had come along." Pat Leonard assisted the arrangements, earning him a co-producer credit on 4 of the album's tracks. The title track, Ray of Light, is based on a song called Sephirin by folk duo Curtis Muldoon, released in the early 70s. In 1996, Christine Leach, Muldoon's niece, recorded her version of the track with William Orbit. After Madonna heard Leach's version, she immediately liked it and began rewriting its lyrics. And the vocal melody for Ray of Light is a semitone higher than what Madonna normally sings in. Madonna said about the song, It's totally out of control. The original version is well over 10 minutes long. It was completely indulgent, but I loved it. It was heartbreaking to cut it down to a manageable length. Madonna has mentioned that she considers Frozen to be part of a thematic trilogy with The Power of Goodbye and To Have and Not to Hold. In an interview with Spin magazine, Madonna talked about her inspiration for Frozen. I was so obsessed with the movie The Sheltering Sky and that whole Moroccan orchestral, super romantic, man carrying the woman he loves across the desert vibe. So I told Patrick Leonard that I wanted something with a tribal feel, really lush and romantic. When he started playing some music, I started free associating and came up with the melody. Originally uncertain about what the lead single should be, Madonna was eventually persuaded by the executives at Warner Brothers that Frozen would bridge the gap between the adult contemporary sounds of her last few singles, such as You'll See, Take a Bow and the singles from Evita, and the more exciting electronica sounds of Ray of Light. In an interview with Q magazine, Orbit mentioned that Madonna had laid down her vocal for Swim on the very day her friend and the fashion designer Gianni Versace was murdered outside his mansion in Miami, Florida. Sky Fits Heaven was inspired by a poem called What Fits by Max Blagg, which was used in Gap commercials in the early 90s. Upon seeing the ad, Madonna got in touch with Blagg to get permission to use the poem in her future music. While producing Ray of Light, Madonna and Blagg managed to reach a deal which would allow the singer to include parts of What Fits into her song Sky Fits Heaven, for which Blagg got a payment but got no mention in the credits of the song. The lines in particular, Sky fits heaven so ride it, child fits mother so hold your baby tight, would be used, with the exception of the first line, which would be changed to Sky fits heaven so fly it. The recording was a slow and drawn out process. Madonna likes to work quick, but the album took longer to make than any of her previous records. Orbit's hardware also caused plenty of problems, as they would regularly break down and cause delays until they could be repaired. Speaking about working with Madonna, Orbit had this to say to The Guardian: "She's a fabulous producer. When it says produced by Madonna and William Orbit, people don't always give her the credit for that, but she's as responsible as me." With Frozen chosen as the first single, a video was shot in the Mojave Desert in California over a 3-day shoot in early January 1998, with Chris Cunningham as director. Madonna had come across him from his work with Aphex Twin and their video Come to Daddy. Chris Cunningham spoke at the time about his original concept for the video. The original treatment was massive piles of bodies in the desert. All these figurative sculptures made up of bodies that were all multiple Madonnas. They were all going to split and break up and change into ravens and then change into dogs. Just a performance video, but a really elaborate one using her clothes and any shapes that would come out of her clothes. Initially, Madonna wanted to film the video in Iceland, but decided that a barren desert would create a similarly eerie backdrop rather than having to travel to Europe. Frozen was Madonna's first single to debut at #1 in the UK, and it was her first #1 in the country in 8 years. Upon its release, the album was met with unanimous praise from critics. For the first time in her career, Madonna had achieved full artistic credibility. Ray of Light helped her to reach new audiences and to stay ahead of her competition. Madonna was universally lauded for her latest reinvention and for her canny move of working with William Orbit. Ray of Light dominated the music industry around the world in early 1998, topping the charts in 17 countries including Australia, Belgium, Canada, Germany, Italy, Spain and the UK. The album was certified 7 times platinum for sales of 7 million copies in Europe. It also became the 3rd best-selling album in Europe for the 1998 to 2007 period. To date, the album has sold over 17 million copies worldwide. The 5 singles lifted from the album all performed well throughout the world. By the end of the year, the 4th single, The Power of Goodbye, peaked at number 2 on the United World Chart. The following year, Madonna was nominated for 6 Grammys. Despite being in the music industry for 15 years, she had only won 1 Grammy, and that had been for the Best Music Video long form for the Blonde Ambition World Tour in 1991. But in 1999, Madonna was nominated for 6 Grammys, with Ray of Light winning Best Pop Album and Best Recording Package. It had also been nominated for the most prestigious award, the Album of the Year, which went to Lauryn Hill's The Miseducation Of. Ray of Light, the title track, won Best Dance Recording and Best Short Form Video. The song had also been nominated for Record of the Year. In early 1999, it was confirmed that a tour in support of Ray of Light had been cancelled. Instead, Madonna would be working on a new song with Ricky Martin and a song for the Austin Powers 2 soundtrack, which of course became Beautiful Stranger. And the tour had been cancelled to free up time for the ill-fated movie The Next Best Thing, with Rupert Everett, cancelling a Ray of Light tour for The Next Best Thing. You see, even Madonna makes bad decisions. The Ray of Light era served up some of the most stunning and arresting visuals of Madonna's entire career. Madonna wanted to project a new, softer and uncontroversial image and no trace of sex. Her hair colour and makeup were softer than the erotica and bedtime eras, and her styling was reflective of her new Earth Mother spiritual yogi image. Madonna wanted a fresh new look for her videos, so she chose new video directors she hadn't previously worked with. Madonna was also much gentler and warmer in her interviews and TV appearances. Impressed by the Prodigy's Smack video, she chose to work with Jonas Åkerlund on the title track's promo, which remains a classic until this day. Walter Stern, who had worked extensively with the Prodigy and also did the classic Bittersweet Symphony video for The Verve, directed the Drowned World video. Matthew Rolston was chosen for The Power of Goodbye. Johan Renck, who drew on Memoirs of a Geisha for the Japanese-inspired Nothing Really Matters, is now a producer on the critically acclaimed Chernobyl TV miniseries. He had previously directed videos for the Cardigans, but after Madonna's endorsement, lots of mainstream artists came calling, including Kylie, All Saints and Robbie Williams, among many others. As for William Orbit, producing Ray of Light rejuvenated his career, and its success brought other major acts knocking. He was soon hired to produce all of Blur's 13 album and has since worked with acts such as U2, Pink and Robbie Williams, among many others. In a 2009 interview with The Telegraph, Orbit said, "I hate it when people say I reinvented her. I find it embarrassing. She wanted to make this major statement, and if I hadn't come along, someone else would have. She was the savvy one to make it work. People think she was the star and I had the musical talent, but we were equals. It was a real collaboration." Madonna had reclaimed her crown as the Queen of Pop and extended her legacy well into the next decade. The album has had a long legacy and proven to be her most enduring record. In various polls of favourite Madonna albums, Ray of Light invariably comes up trumps. It regularly appears on lists of the greatest albums of all time, and it is widely credited with bringing electronica into the mainstream. Nelly Furtado has said that she used Ray of Light as inspiration for her 2006 comeback album Loose. Adele named Ray of Light as one of her chief inspirations for her third studio album, 25, her first album after becoming a mother. Speaking in 2018 to the official chart company, Orbit reflected on the 4.5 months he had spent in Los Angeles making the record. "Something has happened to pop music at the moment. Back then there was no fear. Now everybody is terrified of doing something different, and the music industry is stuck in a rut. We got in the studio, broke all the rules, and didn't really think about the consequences." The legacy of Ray of Light almost a quarter of a century after its release is undeniable. It is arguably the most important album of Madonna's career, as it helped her to re-establish herself. Who knows what the rest of Madonna's career in the noughties and beyond would have looked like if it hadn't been for Ray of Light. So how do you measure the greatness of an album era? Maybe Like a Virgin and True Blue sold more copies, and Like a Prayer spawned more classic singles, and the Blonde Ambition tour redefined the pop concert. But Ray of Light is still to this day her most critically acclaimed album. Madonna was a wellspring of creativity during that album cycle, and she seemed more relaxed and self-assured than perhaps at any other time. William Orbit's production has aged well, and the visuals still stand up today. And it was an era when the general music buying public, Madonna's fans, and even her most ardent of detractors could not dispute that the Queen of Pop crown belonged to her and her alone.